Hi, I'm Joyce and I'm with OC Habitats. Welcome back to the Tide Pool series. Today, I'll be talking about the low tide zone. The low tide zone is constantly submerged underwater, except during special minus tides, which occurs when the tide recedes below 0 feet. Due to the high submersion rates, the animals in this zone must constantly endure biological stressors, such as predation and interspecific competition, or competition between other animals, for food and space. As a result, there's a higher diversity of organisms, but fewer abundance of these species in the low tide zone. Depending on which tide pool you go to, there's no guarantee that you'll find the same species from tide pool to tide pool, since there's so many. Today, I'll be highlighting a couple of species that you might find in the low tide zone. They're the sea urchins, the nudibranchs, and the opal-eye fish.
Look, I found some urchins. They look like spiky little balls.
You're right, Gina. The spikes or spines on their body are not venomous, but they can be used to protect the urchins by deterring any predators from coming nearby. Animals that prey on the urchins are sea stars, some crabs, giant green anemones, and sea otters. The spines are also covered in cilia, which resembles microscopic frills. These cilia create a water current to help carry food to the urchin, while washing away any waste that is produced.
If the urchin has spines, then how do they eat?
If you want to understand how they eat, you'll need to understand their basic anatomy. So the urchins have a hard outer shell called a test, and is made up of 10 fused plates. So on every single plate, there's spikes, but on every other plate, they have little holes where their 2 feet can stick out. So when an algae gets stuck to their spine, they'll use their 2 feet to move it along their body to the underside where their mouth is located. But if there are no algae, then the urchin will move about using their spines, their feet, or even their mouth to find their food. Once their food is digested, they'll excrete it through their anus, which is on top of their head.
They can move and have teeth? Can you tell me more about that?
Sure, why not? Since sea urchins that live in the tide pools like to hide in the cracks and crevices of the rocks to avoid the pounding waves, they like their food to be brought to them by drifting through the water. Sea urchins that live in the kelp bed also like to have their food brought to them. However, if the food source decreases, the urchins will start to move and hunt out more algae, becoming a threat to the kelp bed ecosystem. These urchins will become mini lawnmowers and eat away at all of the kelp, resulting in a barren area, known as the sea urchin barrens. On to their teeth. So the urchins have 5 teeth, and it's called the Aristotle's lantern, and they use it to graze at the algae and to make a home scar.
What's a home scar? Don't they already have a house?
Yeah. So a home scar is a depression made by the sea urchins scraping down at the substrate. And since they use their teeth so much, it can be replaced kind of like a shark's teeth. Here's an interesting fact about the sea urchins. When left in a stressed environment, these animals are the first animals to show a change in behavior. The sea urchins will typically decrease in movement and their spines will begin to droop. This can be beneficial to anyone working in the ocean because they can figure out if the water might be polluted, have a change in temperature, or any other changes in the environment. Wow, who knew that the sea urchins can be so detrimental yet so helpful in serving as the ocean's indicator? Can you remember where the Aristotle's lantern is located in the urchin? Is it on their spine, their mouth, or their feet? If you answered their mouth, you're doing great. The Aristotle's lantern is a set of 5 teeth that the sea urchins can constantly reproduce since they're always getting grazed down. They're used to graze away at algae and help them create their home scar in the tide pool.
Whoa, there's so many fish in the water.
You're right. So the fish fry uses the tide pool as a nursery before they swim out into the ocean as an adult. But if you see any fish with 1 or 2 white dots, then you're looking at the opal-eye fish.
A fish fry? But I don't see any fried fish.
Well, a fish fry is just another term for a baby fish. But speaking of baby fish, the opal-eye can range anywhere between 1 to 9 inches in the tide pools, but out in the ocean, they can grow up to 25 inches.
How long do the fish stay in the tide pool before going out into the ocean?
Well, the fish fry stays in the tide pool until they mature, which is about 2 to 3 years before they leave. As the fish gets bigger, they'll move to the tide pools that are deeper so that they can move around more. If you notice, the smaller fish forms denser schools of up to 2 dozen individuals, while the larger juvenile fish forms less dense schools. After the opal-eye fish matures, they'll swim out into the ocean to live as adults in the kelp forest.
Does that mean that the adult fish reproduce in the ocean, or do they come back into the tide pools to reproduce?
That's a great question. So during late spring and early summer, the adult fish will come back to the shallower part of the ocean and spawn in the water column. Once the gametes are fertilized, the larvae will stay in the water column until they grow a bit, and then they'll form a school of fish before taking a short trip to the shallower tide pools. And by being in the shallow tide pools, they can avoid predation and increase their lifespan because the predators out in the ocean include sharks, birds, and sea lions.
If the fish are trying to avoid predators, then why are they staying in groups?
There are several reasons that the fish do like to stay in groups, especially with those that are similar in size and appearance. A school of fish that looks identical to one another are considered healthy. Any member of the group that stands out and looks different is more likely to get targeted by their predators, resulting in an increase in lifespan of the other fish. But by living in a group, the fish can also create a confusion effect. The bigger the group, the harder it will be for predators to pick out individual prey from a group due to information overload. Besides avoiding predation, living in a school is beneficial in finding food and a mate.
Wow, these fish sure know how to avoid predators. Since there are so many fish in a school, what can they eat?
Well, in the tide pool, the juveniles exclusively eat any algae coming in from the tide. But out in the ocean, in the kelp beds, the opal-eye adults will eat the kelp and any invertebrates on it. So they'll grab a piece of kelp and move their heads from side to side to twist off a chunk before eating it. When swimming in the sea, it's beneficial for fish to swim as a group. Can you remember why it's important for opal-eye fish to swim as a school? Is it to avoid predation, attract a mate, or find a suitable habitat? If you answer to avoid a predator, you're on the right track. By living in a school, the opal-eye fish can confuse their predators, but also notify the predator if there are any unhealthy fish living in the group. If the predator does end up eating the unhealthy fish, they'll remove the bad gene from the genetic pool and ensure that only healthy genes will be passed down to the next generation of fish.
I'm kind of sad I didn't get to see any colorful nudibranchs today.
Me too, but if you have any questions, I can answer them for you.
That'd be great. So I know that nudibranchs are very brightly colored animals. Is that a similar defense mechanism to the rainforest frogs to help warn off their predators?
Yeah, it is. Their brightly colored body tells their predator, "Come at me, I'm not afraid of you. If you try to eat me, it will hurt you more than it will hurt me." However, if the predators decide not to heed their warning, then they will get stung by the nudibranch's nematocytes or stinging cells.
Can the nudibranchs regenerate their stinging cells like the anemones?
The nudibranchs cannot regenerate the stinging cells themselves, but they can obtain it by eating other animals, like the anemones or the hydroids. By only eating anemones and hydroids, which are baby jellyfish, the nudibranchs will obtain their stinging cells. While feasting on their prey, the nudibranch will release a mucus to avoid being stung. As the prey is being digested, the Spanish shell nudibranch will absorb the nematocytes into their serrata, which are the bright orange fringe on the outside of their body, and have it ready to use.
Do you think it would hurt if I tried to touch the nudibranchs?
It should be harmless to humans since we're so big compared to them because they're only an inch, but you should not be touching the nudibranchs because once the nudibranchs do use their nematocysts, they kind of lose it. So you'll have wasted the nudibranchs' time and energy when they could go out and be collecting more nematocysts to recover the ones that they've lost.
I know that the nudibranch have two little horns on their heads. Do you know what they're for?
Yeah, so these horns are called rhinophores, and their sensory functions are to search out food and to find out mates.
What do they do once they find their mate?
Since the nudibranchs are hermaphrodites, mating is easy once they find a mate since they are not self-fertilizing. But before I tell you how they mate, I'm going to go through a quick anatomy lesson. The male organ is located on the right side of the head, next to the rhinophore, while the female opening is located near the middle of the body, on their right side. Once the nudibranch finds their mate, they will do a little dance to position themselves head to tail on their right side so that the male organ will align with the female opening. Then, the nudibranch will mate for about 5 to 10 minutes. After the gametes are fertilized, the nudibranch will lay an egg case that resembles a beaded necklace. Also, the nudibranchs can grow quite fast. because they only have a lifespan of approximately 1 year. Now that you've learned about some interesting facts about the nudibranchs, can you recall how the nudibranchs get their nematocysts? Is it through osmosis, through regeneration, or by eating other animals? If you answered eating other animals, good job. The nudibranchs only eat anemones and hydroids to regain their nematocysts. So if you ever see a nudibranch in the tide pool, just remember, don't touch them, because if you do, they'll lose their stinging cells and lose precious time and energy to try to regain them. Now that you've learned about some animals in the low tide zone and their issues and adaptations, you can be more aware about how they interact with the environment. To learn more about different species in each zonation, you can check out our channel for previous and upcoming videos. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for future videos by OCH.